I thought it'd be interesting to just step from one to the next and give a little bit of, I guess, commentary of what I'm seeing. So this was the concrete prep tool, the Diamond Brush concrete prep tool on a floor sander, a swing machine. And when I look at the finish, I can see that there are the high spots that I've cut, and you can see that they're light grey. The rest of it is cleaner than beside it, as you can clearly see, but it hasn't cut through the whole top layer, and that's why it's not that light grey colour. The actual colour is quite uniform across the floor, which means that the Diamond Brush tool did flex and bend with the undulations in the floor to provide a pretty even finish. It wasn't the fastest tool. You'd have to do, if you're going to prep the whole floor with this tool, you'd be there for quite a while, and that might be okay, but that's worth putting into the mix. If I walk across to this particular section of slab, this was the Prep Plus tool. It was notably quicker than the concrete prep tool, and you can see, interestingly enough, it also got quite an even grey, meaning that you can see that it cut the hollows as well. It prepped more of the top, so you can see the lighter grey is more prevalent on this side than it is on this side. I think you could probably prep the whole slab for a roll coat with this type of tool. Speed would be okay, but still a fair bit of work. If I come across to the grinder, which is what I keep calling my control, which is what people are quite familiar with, the grinder shows you that it obviously cuts the tops and doesn't cut the hollows, and that's that can be seen because there's dark sections and light sections. The dark sections is where it hasn't touched it, and if I actually was to zoom in, you'd see that the grinder hasn't, the tooling hasn't actually touched those hollows. So if I want to keep prepping it to cut it all down, I've got a fair bit of work to do to get it all even. Compare it to this side here, it hasn't cut the tops as much, but overall the prep is more consistent across the ups and the downs. The grinder was also slower, or I ran it slower perhaps, than the Prep Plus tool, but whether that's just because of operator use or not, I don't really know. Now the last section is really a stark contrast to all the others, and when I pan across them, you can see the differences. So the Shop Blaster clearly will prep the hollows as well as it does the tops. The tracks that we're seeing, I think, is a little bit relating to shooting more shot on one side than the other. The overlapping inconsistencies is more to do with trying to run the small machine by hand. The operator has to dictate the speed and has to drive it in a straight line, and if they don't, well, then you can see the sort of rows. The other thing that we did change operator at this sort of section here. You can see the difference between the light and the dark, and that first run that was done a lot slower. That's why it's lighter, it's done more preparation. One of the major differences that I notice is that shot blasting really hammers the surface to reveal anything that's weak, and the efficiency of the vacuum process means that it lifts all the contaminants very quickly. So it's worth zooming in on a couple of things. So firstly, you can see that there was something that sat just below the surface, and it's blown the top off it and whatever was weak on top of it, whereas the grinder hasn't exposed that anywhere else. The other thing is the actual cracks. The cracks have all been blown out, and the edges I guess caved in a little bit, like cleaned up the sides. So it's shown how frail the edges were, whereas on the other forms of prep, it hasn't really hit the edges. So we would have to chase out those cracks. Whereas I get the feeling that if I could actually go on and repair these cracks straight as they are. So overall, that was the idea, was to show different methods of prep side by side on the same slab with the same area, and that would give us some context as to how fast or slow different forms of prep are, what the different results are, and what might be suitable for the next flooring project that we're doing. And of course, this all ties into the concept of, if we're going to make resin flooring mainstream, we have to understand what the right preparation is. And when I say right preparation, it doesn't mean that it's always shot blasting. It means that you're evaluating what the specification is, you're evaluating what the manufacturer requires for their flooring system, and then you're coming to site and you're understanding what are you actually dealing with. What is the hardness of this slab or the compression strength of this slab? And do you have to make adjustments based on that? That's what right preparation is. So that's the end of this particular trial. I've enjoyed this little test, side-by-side test, and I hope you have too. Any questions, of course, just ask. As always, take care and keep smiling.